go on. I think we have a few more that are coming, but I'm going to put that into play here. Okay, can everybody see everything? Excellent. I'm afraid to touch anything. So welcome, happy Thanksgiving. I hope everybody had a nice holiday. And I have Town Council Pat Ahern on via speaker. Oh God, why did that do that?
You moved.
I moved, apparently. It's coming back, it's all coming back. So, Pat is joining via remote participation. I'm gonna just start by calling the roll to see who all is here. Laura, you're gonna mark everybody off as we go. Ellen Larkin Rawlings.
Here.
And you had to put this one right after that. Mary Ellen Paropoulos. That was enough of a challenge that night. Maya Plotkin.
Here.
Eric Pelletier.
Here.
Nancy Hyde.
Here.
Nancy James.
Here. Laura, Phil can't get in, the door is locked.
And on cue, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Phil Shapiro. Da-da-da-da-da. All right. Phil is coming in, and I'm Rob Gotti, and then I'll just do the ex officios. Molly Fitzpatrick.
Here.
Stephanie McManus.
Here.
Patrick Ahern. Very good. Nora Loughnane.
Here.
That didn't look good. Elijah is not here. Tim Pivovar.
Here?
Lemma is coming or no?
She's on her way.
She's on her way. Excellent. And then Todd Korchin and Jimmy McCarthy are not here tonight, and given what is on our agenda, I think that's quite all right. So let's start with finally good to be reconvened. I think the last time we all met was what, January last year? It was January, February of last year, this year, I guess, as we were awaiting the facility studies. And Nancy, I'm going to ask you to move over next to Phil, because I have a feeling it's the movement of the table that is shaking the wire. Thank you. And we finally got the facility studies in our staggered fashion. I believe it was somewhere early April that you guys received yours on the school side, and we were able to get ours in early July. And then those were those sort of early drafts, and now the full reports are done. And so that becomes one of our main missions, is to help define how we're going to prioritize things going forward. And we'll talk a little bit about setting a mission and a charter and how we're going to govern ourselves, and what does success look like for this group over the next 12 months. I really want to make sure that we get a meeting cadence and some of the first ones scheduled, and then I hope everybody had an opportunity. I know Tim and Lemma have been doing sort of a road show on the school side of things, but I hope you all had an opportunity to look at the high-level presentation that Doran Whittier made back in July to the Select Board, and I'll also share where all the rest of the more detailed materials live. But I want to begin with just a welcome to some of our new members. Eric Pelletier, welcome to the Long Range Financial Planning Committee. And if you would, just give us a little bit of background on you, how long you've been in town, what you do for a living, family, etc.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. So Eric Pelletier, been in Westwood for about a year and a half now. I live over on University Avenue there. Professionally, I work as a wealth advisor with Merrill Lynch, office out of Providence. Just got married this year, so it's actually 6 months to the day that I've been married, so my wife would kill me if I didn't know that by heart.
Now you have it on the record, so that's good. I can back you up on that.
And have been really wanting to get involved in the community. Volunteering seemed like a great way to do so, and given my background, the Long Range Financial Planning Committee seemed like a really happy mix there. So I'm really happy to be involved.
And we're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Mary Ellen.
Yes, I'm Mary Ellen Paravalos. We've been in town since 2008 with my husband Peter and my daughter Sophia and my son Peter as well. My background is in engineering and finance risk management, and so excited to be part of this group to make sense of our long-term plan. Yes, and Peter and I have been together, over 30 years, so you've got some time to go.
I've learned it all already, right?
Very, very cute.
Well, to have some context for who else is around the table with you, why don't we begin with Tim, and we'll work our way around the table so that you have, an understanding of who you're on the committee with and who is also serving in ex officio roles from the town.
Sure. So Tim Pavovar, school superintendent. This is my third year as the superintendent here in Westwood, and just very happy that the committee made the decision to bring me in. So,
Maya Plotkin, I am the current chair of the school committee. I grew up in Westwood, and I've moved back in 2005, and I've been here ever since.
Ellen Rawlings, we can leave the middle name out, current chair of the planning board. I think this is the third year, I've lost count. Like Maya, grew up here, known Maya for a very long time, moved back here for good in 2015.
Nancy Hyde, been here in town for 38 years now and raised our family here. I've served in many capacities in town, including the Select Board and Board of Selectmen, and served with Mr. Shapiro. Nice to see you, Phil. And I've been on other boards and committees, and also when I first went on the Board of Selectmen, we formalized the Long Range Financial Planning Committee and had it for a long time, and then it kind of morphed into it just being the finance department working through the select board, and I'm really glad that Rob and the board have brought it back to this committee level, because I think talking about things amongst a broader group and bringing in the ex officio members is really healthy. So thank you, Rob, for your leadership in that, and I'm happy to serve again.
I've met with each of you prior to this, but Rob Gotti, current chair of the select board, been in town 25 years, have had kids go through the school system, been involved in all kinds of things from youth sports to the planning board to now the select board. So buckle up. This is one of those groups where, you meet the definition of, if you want something done, find a busy person. So you are now officially busy people. So I'll move that over to another busy person, Nancy James.
So thrilled to be here. I'm glad that we're meeting in person. So Nancy James, I was thinking back, so I've lived in town for 19 years, and was thinking about all the great people that I've met through volunteering in town. So I don't know if anyone remembers when we had a newcomers club, but we had one back in the day, so I got involved, and I think when we first moved here from New York. So met some great people doing that, was a co-chair on the Westwood Early Childhood Council, pretty involved at Martha Jones. I also coordinate the Westwood PMC Kids Ride. Been doing that since 2019, and I am now on the FS1 steering committee.
Phil Shapiro, I've been here since 1977. And I've been married that long, too. And I've been on, there was a charter study commission that sort of got me involved a little bit. And then FinCom, and then the Business Development Advisory Board, and then I was an assessor, then I was a selectman, then I was an assessor again, then I was the town treasurer, etc. And I spent 12 years running the Boston office for Standard & Poor's. And when Nancy and I and Pat were selectmen, we used this group in part to have a forum to discuss financial policies in addition to just physical facilities. Because some of what competes for resources is, how seriously do we take our bond rating and some of the covenants and commitments we have relative to our indebtedness, and how do we work with our balance sheet, which almost there's really not another forum to have that discussion. So, whatever, is probably less about that. On the other hand, I think there are issues there that can fit in and sometimes create a little tension or sometimes create a little opportunity for us.
Nora Loughnane. I've been a Westwood resident since 1993. I have 3 grown sons, all who went through the school system. Was involved in many school endeavors, from Westwood Elementary School Coalition to the Foundation for Education, which I chaired for 2 years. I was a volunteer on Parish Council at St. Denis, very involved in sports activities that my sons were involved with. I served on the Conservation Commission for about 8 years and on the Westwood Historical Commission for another 4 years. After that, I took a position as the town planner in 2008 and then transitioned to my current position as Director of Community and Economic Development in 2014. And since then, have been working on a lot of projects, all geared to increasing our commercial tax base.
I'm Stephanie McManus. I'm the town's finance director. I've been here, like Tim, about 3 years. Previously, I was in the city of Boston before that. I live in West Roxbury, and I'll be probably the shortest. That's all I have.
And I'm Molly Fitzpatrick. I'm the interim town administrator. I've also been here about 3 years. We have a little cohort. Before being the interim, I was the deputy town administrator for a number of years. Previously, the HR director in Norwood, and I live in Medfield.
Hi, I'm Laura Bukhari. I'm the budget director for the town. I've talked to all of you as the admin for this committee. I've lived in town since 2000, and my girls went through the schools as well, so I've been involved in the schools and everything since then.
Great. Well, you heard Nancy talk about the FS1 committee. You know, we couldn't be talking about facilities without talking about FS1, and you know, where we go from here with respect to FS1, we have put together a really great group of 9 residents who are going to both come to us with recommendations for the short-term solutions as well as a longer-term solution. And that really then brings us to some of what Phil touched on, which is why is this happening? There we go. I promise you there's another slide. It will come up at some point. But, you know, the reality is, as we look at the list of needs, right, we knew back when we did the public safety facility study in 2013 that there were needs at FS1. We were able to do the police station and FS2 as part of, you know, Prop 2.5 because of all the new commercial taxes that were generated down at University Station. We then started to address some of the school needs. And on the school needs side, we dealt with consolidating 2 schools in the Deerfield and the Hanlon and what is now the Pine Hill, in what is a terrific project, an example of, I just don't know when it's going to come back on the screen, of partnering with the state through the MSBA process. And we knew going forward that in order to have a conversation around, this is our collective kitchen table here, to figure out how we prioritize things. I don't know, Charlotte, I don't know if we have another one of those.
I can run a cable, but it'll take me a second.
That'd be all right, because that's more so for the folks in the room. So I'm just sort of stretching a little bit here, I admit, I am sorry.
It's fun.
And so we had to commission the studies. We needed to be able to have facts and be able to have, you know, real good assessments and rough orders of magnitude on the types of things that would be required to maintain. I don't know, actually, Charlotte, if it's the cable or if it's my adapter.
Might be the adapter.
Could be the adapter.
I would imagine
If it's
so.
just for people in the room, we have printouts.
Oh, great, then let's do that.
Thank you, Laura.
She asked us to share. She asked us to share. Nobody else has.
Thank you.
You didn't print it out. You don't want to thank you.
Yeah, sure, we can do that. That'll work.
I know, right? Look at
Pen and paper is the way to go. Sorry.
Thank you.
You don't have room for it.
Exactly. I took
Nice save, Charlotte, thank you.
Oh, there we go, anyways.
All right. So, as we were saying, needs outweigh what we have available in terms of funds. And so that's really why we're together, is to start to develop a master plan. We've heard from the community, they're looking for a master plan. We certainly had a plan with respect to what we wanted to do with public safety buildings. The FS1 is the third leg on that stool. There was a tremendous amount of thoughtful deliberation. Mayor, remind me, was it 76 meetings over 5 years that went into planning the Pine Hill, and tremendous community engagement throughout that process. So this is now the next step. And so what I wanted to do was align on a mission statement. I took a crack at drafting something for us. You all have it in front of you, or it's on the screen. But I really view it as, you know, us developing a fiscally responsible, community-focused and forward-looking master plan, prioritizing our capital investments across a combination of new construction, renovation, reimagining and repurposing of existing structures. There are many needs that you will see identified across the two studies. Obviously, there are more similarities across the various school buildings than there are against the multiple uses that are the municipal buildings. But I want us to, over the next 12 months, analyze all of the needs and opportunities that are identified in those studies, as well as take a really hard look, as we've started to do stuff with our capacity to pay, in order to produce a roadmap balancing service delivery, the operational efficiency, and, you know, the taxpayers' willingness and ability to pay. And we're going to do that through meetings like this. Going to be transparent, collaborative, and thoughtful with regard to our stewardship of the town resources. So that was sort of my first stab at. Is there anything that anyone would like to add, see changed? Is this something that we want to adopt? I will open the floor to any type of thoughts. I realize you're all ingesting this now, so I'll give you a minute.
Minor suggestion. I just think something as simple as repairs could be repairs/renovation.
Okay.
Because some things come up that are broken, like a boiler, which becomes a capital item at town meeting. So instead of it being separate, I think it can be a little bit of both, or you decide, but I think that's.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because I know as we are in sort of budget steering right now, and Tim and Maya and Lemma and Stephanie and I and Molly get together to discuss the upcoming budget year. As we look at the 5-year capital plan, both sides of the ledger did so with these plans in mind, right? So much of what you see on the 5-year plan are things that were identified in the Dorn Whittier studies. Is that a fair representation from the school side?
Yep.
And Steph,
Mm-hmm.
same thing from what we've done. So, you know, yes, repair, but I want us to be really thinking about the long view and how do we address the larger needs.
Let me just give you an example to absorb, and it doesn't have to be in here, but I remember, Bill, we're going to go back into the Wayback Machine, but we used to own the Islington Community Center, and we had an issue of what were we going to do with that building, which was long-term planning, and we had a boiler issue. And the question was, do we invest that money in replacing the boiler and can we sell it? Do I have the right building? It was, I think it was that one.
Yep.
And so it just gets caught up in a discussion of your longer-term planning sometimes, so.
I would think probably the Sheehan electrical panel would be another great example of something like that,
Real time?
you know?
Yes.
So those are things, yes, those are going to happen, and that's part of what has been identified in these studies are, you know, what are things that are going to be needed to be addressed in the 1 to 3 year window, the 4 to 7 year window, and the 8 to 10 year window. And that was really on both sides as far as Doran Whittier went in terms of looking out, because that cone of uncertainty just gets larger and larger the further out you go. So I take repair, and I will add that to this, but is there anything else?
Well, just a similar maybe thought, I don't know if it fits in here, but in terms of, is it part of the scope of this group to look at that kind of whole picture view of the financial situation in order to figure out how much can we afford to pay as it relates to capital, but you can't really do that in isolation of the whole picture. So how much of that is an input to this group, or how much of that is this group sort of looking at?
That is why Stephanie is here. When we met in 24, I want to say it was late spring of 24, one of the things that we did was it a 20-year run that we did of what does the budget look like if you just sort of straight line it out at 3%? What does our debt service schedule look like? When are things starting to roll off? Because those become factors in, okay, as we prioritize, where can we begin to plan and slot things? The other piece that's not in this mission statement, but I want your thoughts on, you know, Phil, you talked about the balance sheet. Well, we're only talking about the cost side of the ledger here. And Nancy, when did you all start talking about University Station initially, and how long did it ultimately take to come to fruition?
Well, I mean, back in the 90s, we were talking about what to do with University Avenue, the town was, and then the assemblage of properties for what was planned to be Westwood Station started in 2004. And then the recession hit in 2008 before we did anything other than, the developer did anything other than demolish buildings, and everything came to a halt. Ownership changed a little bit, and the groundbreaking was in 2013. So it was. Groundbreaking was
Yeah.
in 2013, so there was,
So let's call it 15 to 20 years?
yeah, really.
I mean,
And it
so-
build out was 2015, 2016, sort of. There were still things subsequent, but
So when we talk about, you know, I've put in sort of this middle band of this mission statement. Over the next 12 months, we'll analyze our needs as identified in the studies, because we want to be able to start to, you know, prioritize where things might fall in a 15-year time horizon. But the one thing that we know cures a lot of ills is new revenue. And so I think we need to add that to the discussion of this group as we start to mentally plan and maybe slot things. Now, we're not going to have all the answers as we begin to sort of put things into a priority list. Some of that, if something new comes about, could help accelerate paying for things. But that's a real issue, because we only have 6% of our land in town that is zoned for commercial use. So, and the vast majority of it, Nora, right, is built out at this point.
Absolutely.
Yep. So that is something that I think I want to try and find a way to work into a mission statement here. So I will be open to suggestion as to how we might work that in.
do you want it in the mission statement or action items? I mean, usually your mission statement is just that one impactful first statement.
Yeah, and I did this one specific to the addressing the facility study to produce this master plan. But this group is not going to dissolve once we produce a master plan. And a master plan needs to be flexible because whether it's new growth, whether it's some state or federal aid that, or grant money that might be able to come in, that could change whatever our sort of sequencing and prioritization of the plan is. So that's I really tried to hone this in on the next 12 months regarding a master plan, but I do touch on it, the new growth, in a next slide here. Just in terms of our, go ahead.
So one other thing to, if you could go back to
Yeah.
that last one. So the second one sort of addresses the last question about, you know, are we also looking at what's available? And I think one of the things that it's good to visit from time to time is sort of where we stand relative to the constraints of Prop 2.5, our own financial policies, how those financial policies interact with our bond rating, and what the trade-offs might be should we decide to be somewhat less conservative, which might put the bond rating at risk, might mean it's a little more expensive when we borrow, but might create an additional revenue stream from within our existing financial structure. I know Stephanie doesn't want to hear me talk about this, but I've been a CFO for 35 years, and I did bond ratings for 12 years, and you should visit these issues. There isn't a right and a wrong, because, you know, a big part of why we're a AAA community is because of the demographics, but also because of the financial policies that we've had in place for many, many years. And we sort of assume that those are, I mean, they're there and they've done a great service for the town. But things change, and you have to keep sort of an open mind about sort of how you view those trade-offs.
Sure.
Going forward. In other words, it's one thing in 2014 when you know you've got a whole bunch of new stuff coming on to say this is how conservative we're going to be and we'll get a AAA bond rating and so on and so forth. With less potential growth on the horizon, it makes sense, not necessarily with a whole fresh sheet of paper, but it makes sense to look at those decisions and see how they might trade off against, okay, is it worth being a AAA, or is it worth being able to do 3 of these projects in the next 12 years versus 2 of them?
I will tell you, this one sounds like a fascinating topic for a dedicated meeting, legitimately.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we're going to need to be creative with respect to how we grow our revenue side of things. I want to level set. I know most people in the room probably understand Prop 2.5, but I don't want to presume that, because I was in a FinCom meeting where there was a member who once asked, why does the state make us go up 2.5%? And so I just want to, you know, that was put in place as a, you know, safeguard so that, you know, 2.5%, anything above 2.5% plus some number for new growth would have to be approved by the community, right? There, you know, prior to Prop 2.5, and Phil could probably give an entire dissertation on this, you know, there was sort of unconstrained budget growth, and, you know, there was sort of a tax revolution behind it that said, nope, anything over 2.5%, you've got to get the voters' approval. So, and I just also want to level set that people get the difference between capital and operating, because you touched on the operating budget and some of the challenges with Prop 2.5. Prop 2.5 is certainly a challenge. We feel that every budget year. It seems like we start with, where are we, what do we have in terms of commitments to, different collective bargaining groups, and what is the gap that we're trying to fill? So we are basically up against it as far as the operating budget goes when it pertains to our ability to borrow any further for capital. Is that fair, Steph?
Within Proposition 2.5?
Then Prop 2.5?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, so I just want to make sure that everybody has a sort of a level playing field in terms of what we're talking about. But I would love to dedicate, multiple meetings to, creative problem solving on the revenue side of things.
It'd be great if the financial policies can get distributed to everybody. I know we got them a couple of years ago, but it'd be nice to.
Maybe we'll even distribute the whole capital book that's posted, because that has them in there, so we'll do that.
Yep, thank you, that's great.
And just one thing, I'm not sure what kind of educational sessions we may have, but perhaps Stephanie, if some kind of presentation of the financial situation from a strategic perspective, that we can identify kind of the risks or the opportunities. The one you mentioned, Phil, is one of them, because I do think where we are from a risk tolerance perspective is good to really understand, because then we know where we can push it, or where we really have to be more conservative. So having that kind of outlined up front, I think would be helpful, and then maybe do deep dives.
And this is the forum for that, right? This is the type of place where, we're going to be able to get into a lot more depth relative to budget discussions than we do with updates at the school committee meetings or the select board meetings. I mean, Stephanie and Lemma do a fantastic job of keeping things, tight in terms of our spending to what our budgets are, and do a marvelous job in, was this 27th year in a row? What was the number this year? In terms
28th,
of,
yeah.
28th, okay. What's the award?
GFOA. Yep.
So, from a fiscal management standpoint, I feel very, very good that we have a great handle on. At this time of year, you're typically juggling three, right? You're closing out prior year, you're in the midst of this year, and you're planning the next year. So, but I think looking at what those pressures look like on a longer term basis is what this group can do.
So Rob, I had a thought on, I like that you've referenced the community in here and having it community focused, and I think in addition to having education sessions for us as a group, I'd love to see some not so much transparency, but from more so outreach to the community in terms of when we need to have a large capital expenditure, why we really can't do that, right, within Prop 2.5, because it's challenging enough, right, from an operating standpoint, and this is why, we need to have a bond and, or issue a bond.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just the capital side of things that puts pressure on the operating budget, right? When we're talking about fixed costs and healthcare that everybody's seeing going up, double digits in just about every sector, well, let's use round math. On a $100 million budget for the town, if fixed costs are 20% and those are going up 10%, and we can only go up by Prop 2.5 plus, let's call it 0.5% for new growth, so we can go up 3%. Well, last I checked, 10% on $20 million was $2 million, which is 2%. So there's a good portion of your 3% that's spoken for right there. And that's what puts massive pressure on the operating budget. And, the capital debt service is part of that, but, that's actually known. We kind of vote that,
We do, but it was eye-opening, I think. I will just say and leave it at that over the last year.
I think the more that we can get residents to understand the complexity of the budget and the pressures that really exist, the better the conversation will be. So I totally agree. I love that idea. Let's talk a little bit about.
Do you mind if I just add one
Sure.
comment here? What we've just had is a very technical conversation, but I don't want to lose sight of the adaptive challenge that we have here. And I think there's a couple of nods to it. What I don't see an explicit reference in is the impact of the decisions we make on the lives of residents in the community. Because that's ultimately what government is about. And as we've seen an erosion of trust in government at the national level, at the state level, at the local level, to explicitly say that these are not decisions about buildings or structures, there are decisions about how ultimately they have an impact on the lives of the residents of this community, whether they're school children or residents who need emergency services, or how we can attract people to work for the DPW so our roads get plowed, right? All those things have an impact. I think putting explicit reference to that in the mission statement is something that I think needs to be there. I don't know how to make that. I don't think this is the place to wordsmith it.
No, but I did try to give the nods that you're seeing, but I like the idea because you're right. At the end of the day, and we've acknowledged this many times, that's what makes Westwood a desirable community, is the level of services that we're able to provide, you know, across any number of things, from public safety to human health, human services to the schools. You know, all of that are what draw people to the community. So I think something more explicit, and I would be open to, if you have a thought on how to
With a
put
little
that
more
in
time,
there.
I can see what we can do.
That
Well,
would be.
and I would add to what you're saying, Tim, it's now and into the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
That ties to the long-range nature of this group, but also it's the stewardship that Rob is referencing,
Yeah,
so it
absolutely.
would kind of bring it together, because all this work isn't just for fun and yucks, and because, wow, I feel like spending money. That's not what it's about.
Yeah, there's
That's not what the fire station was about.
I put this out here as a thought starter for us, and so.
Well,
yeah.
you did a nice job. I think we're just talking about tweaking, but I think to convey a message and then be able to, when we reference getting into the micro, the action items, then we can say, and this is how it fits back into what we were talking about, not, gee, they just like to spend money in this town. I mean, there was kind of that undercurrent of, okay, what next? And there's no planning, and it's just all sort of like, I feel like doing this building now. And
Yep.
it's not the way it goes. It's very hard work to get to yeses. It was very hard work to get the beautiful Pine Hill School done. It's been hard work to do a lot of these buildings, and it's because, I mean, look at this building. This is a great example of Westwood doing very well, and a lot of people were saying libraries aren't so important anymore, and why do we need it? And we had an old library that half of it was below grade, and it was musty and moldy, and there were only one place where there were bathrooms in the basement, which was not handicap accessible. I mean, when you talk about the quality of life, that just violated it on so many levels. And it was really hard to do the shuffle game where that building next door used to sit here
Yeah.
as a former school administration building, previously a school. So it takes a lot of work. That's what your husband was involved in.
So I think that we definitely want
It's
to call
great.
that
I mean,
out
I
more
think, yeah, I
explicitly.
think Tim is spot on that too.
And so I then moved from a mission statement to sort of our charter and operating culture. And I view this as, all right, our output is we're going to develop a master plan that really can be a roadmap for the next 15 to 20 years. And we're going to do that by taking a really, really hard look at those facility studies, right? And those studies gave us, you know, a great report on the current conditions from a safety and accessibility standpoint. You know, looked at the operational needs and the user groups that use those buildings, and you know, the amount of available space for them to operate and do their jobs, as well as I alluded to earlier, the maintenance costs out over the next sort of 3-year increments. And then the part that excites me most is evaluating the options for how do we address the greatest number of the needs most efficiently to be able to get as much done in a fiscally responsible way as possible. Once we've done all that, then I'd like us to be able to step back and prioritize those needs and then take a pause and get community feedback, right? To what you were talking about earlier, Nancy, is, let's bring people in along the way, because, we can have all the conversations we want, but at the end of the day, once we have a plan's only ever gonna manifest itself likely one project at a time. Maybe there would be some that could be a joint project, but, in all likelihood, they're ever only gonna be produced in terms of voting one at a time. So people could be moving to town who've never seen any of this discussion or any of these conversations around how did we prioritize the list, and it'll still feel like we're coming at them one project at a time without a plan. So this, to me, is what we need to do, is get a plan that we can put forward to the community and have people feel like, okay, there's been a lot of thought put into this, and there is a roadmap to get there. Are we going to get there in as quick a time frame as any one constituent group might want? No, but we're going to do our level best to do it within our ability to pay. And so that's kind of what I view as, our charter. And then that plan is going to be what is, our definition of success, and is it something that can ultimately be supported by the majority of residents? And as I alluded to earlier, that also maintains the flexibility to be able to change as circumstances change. And those circumstances could be really positive. We could get, mentioned to the Lieutenant Governor the other day when she was in town, that it'd be great to have an MSBA for public safety buildings, similar type of project. But there could also be urgencies. Nancy, you talked about the boiler at the community center. We know there have been issues at the middle school, right? We certainly know that there are things that we need to be, addressed rapidly with respect to the FS1. So, and those are just sort of the highest priority items that we all know about. So, does everybody agree with sort of the charter and the definition of success, what we're doing? Okay.
I have one quick question, just
Yes.
kind of for clarity for anybody who's watching this. I like everything I saw on that last slide about prioritizing. Thank you.
Yep.
How do I ask this concisely? Is FS1 proceeding now, or is that going to be evaluated as part of all of this?
So it is moving independent of this, but it will be part of this conversation.
Okay.
I think when you get to, the municipal list, you will see it is far and away the number one thing that needs to be addressed. And Nancy is on both committees, and I know the rest of the FS1 committee is going to be paying very close attention to the types of conversations we have here with respect to, well, what's coming, right? That was a question we heard at the Public Safety Forum back in October. Well, what else is on the horizon? How many planes are circling the tower? Well, that's part of what we need to do to lay out, to say, okay, what are those priorities and what are the things that we think need to get done and in what sequence? And then based on those, what is a realistic time frame for the most urgent on that list? Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Rob, I just want to, when we're on speaking of prioritization, I just want to make sure that we're emphasizing throughout this process that, we can put whatever prioritization we want in place, but at the end of the day, the buildings are going to ultimately dictate the prioritization, meaning, when we did the 2015 school study, Thurston wasn't even on our radar. And we were sort of thinking, okay, what's next? Sheehan, absolutely after Pine Hill. And now we're in a situation where Thurston has significant, issues that have come to light since the 2015 and the 2025 study.
Yep.
So I just think as long, I think it's great that we have these conversations, that we put together some sort of formal recommendation of prioritization. But we just need to stress to residents, to everybody, that ultimately we have to be nimble and address the needs of the buildings as they age.
That's the flexibility in that last bullet there, was meant
Yep.
to address both the positive things that could make some things change or some of those real challenges with buildings. And I just want to touch on one other thing. With respect to prioritization, I don't think it is this group's domain to prioritize within the school buildings, set of priorities. You guys have educational imperatives you're trying to deliver, and so I know you're having those discussions around what are the ways that you are recommending moving the school program forward, but that school program needs to fit within the larger conversation so that whatever it is you're pushing as your highest priority based on conditions today, that needs to fit into this overall plan. And then as there are second or third priorities, as we look on that 20-year horizon, where do those fit relative to some of the other things that are on the municipal side? Does that make sense to folks? Does anybody have an issue with that?
No, we see it all.
Yep.
But don't opine on it all, or not deciding it all.
Yeah, I think that, that's really the domain, the schools are the domain of the school committee and the administration, right? You guys know what you're trying to deliver from an educational program, which is part of what makes Westwood the desirable community is. So I think this is, our conversations when I talk about prioritization are, where does school priority 1 fit in the overall prioritization list of the other things, and where do as you have identified 2, 3, 4, whatever they may be, where do those fit in the grand plan? But I don't think this group should be defining for you all what your priority is. Is that okay with you? I think so.
But I think that being said, I still think we need to look at everything holistically, and I might not be grasping what you're saying. So I think maybe we don't opine on Sheehan instead of Thurston, or Thurston instead of Sheehan, and things like that. But I think we also need to be mindful of kind of looking at the whole picture. So tell me if I missed.
So, no. Where I think that becomes important is, okay, for example, the Deerfield School, right? That wasn't part of the conversation for FS1 because it is under the care, custody, control of the schools. Could it be a solution for other things? You guys just voted to, put that forward to town meeting this spring to have it returned to the town. Could that be a solution for some of the other things on the list? Possibly, right? Mm-hmm. But there are a number of other dominoes that fall with those things. The same thing when we start to talk about some of the really creative problem solving. And I don't want to get into a bunch of crazy specifics, but there might be, if you were putting forward an idea to do some consolidation in a different way with a new middle school, that might change some of the building needs in other places in town, which then could open a door to, well, what if we did a land swap of some sort to allow for, other needs to be addressed? And that's what we'll get into over the course of a bunch of different meetings here. But that's what I mean with respect to, you guys need to prioritize based on delivering an educational program that keeps Westwood in the upper echelon of the Commonwealth. To me, that's your prioritization. Once those decisions are sort of made, that opens up chess pieces to say, all right, so if you're not using this Deerfield, now if we return that, how can we use that to address a number of other needs that are on this list, and do so in a highly efficient and effective way? Does that?
That makes sense.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, and I promise after tonight, I'm not gonna do a whole lot more talking. In fact, I wanna actually take myself out of this entirely. I'd like to actually ask the resident members who are not ex officios, if you would be open to the idea of having 2 resident co-chairs. And I would like to, suggest, since the 2 of you are new, possibly Nancy and Phil as co-chairs. I'd like to bring that to, my colleagues on the select board as well, just to have a discussion with them. But I think there's a benefit to having this be a bigger collective conversation, and it doesn't feel like the select board is pushing something. I don't want that to be the inference at all. So I would love it if, you guys would be open to that idea. And does anybody have a burning desire to be a co-chair?
They look like they're saying yes. I
Yeah.
think that's great. Nancy's like, okay.
Excellent. So we'll bring that forward at the next select board meeting, and then we can bring that back here as well. So let's talk about how we get together, how frequently we get together, whether those are in person like this, or some alternating cadence of in-person versus Zoom, or I think, Molly, we might be able to, with this size group, do the other room. Is that pushing it a little bit on the hybrid?
It would be pushing it if we were all in person.
Okay.
I think today, Nancy, how many do we have in there? Maybe 10 in that?
In that smaller room?
Yeah,
That can be
So
done.
9 at the table and then.
yeah.
We
maybe
used to
4
do
others.
a horseshoe type table and meet in there and
It's
have.
it's not the size of the
number of
room, it's the
people.
hybrid capabilities. So now that the TV in there has a bar that you can host hybrid meetings, but it can't catch all the way in the back. So you could probably do it if it was half and half.
So, I think, I'd love to establish what our cadence looks like. And I know, to my earlier point, this is a room full of very busy people. But we also have some very important work to try and get done. So what feels like both an appropriate cadence and a feasible cadence?
Monthly.
Monthly?
I think if you go every 2 months, you have too much downtime and not enough momentum in getting things done. If you go more frequently, then the people who are doing the work behind the scenes can't get, it's almost asking too much. Because I think out of every meeting will come, can you provide us with this? Can we talk about that next time? And, we're this on a big schedule of a lot of work to do.
Anyone
I'm thinking of you
anyone
guys.
have
You
an
have lots to
alternative?
do.
Anyone
I
have an
really do.
alternative point of view on frequency? Ellen, I know you guys meet twice a month.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to add anything to anyone's plate, but given, I was leaning towards more often than less, much as I don't want to add anything to anyone's plate, including my own. But I just feel like we have a lot to do, and we've had a lot of downtime. So I feel like in some ways, not that we're playing catch-up already, but I think there's a lot to do, and it would be maybe initially to meet a little more frequently and then dial it back.
And I have, in a couple of slides, I actually have sort of what I think is a workflow, and then we can just maybe take a look at that and say, you're right, probably needs to be once every 3 weeks, or, something along those lines. Maybe there's a happy medium between them. But how about on the school side? What do you guys, what are you comfortable with?
I mean, I definitely think that more frequent as opposed to less, because the less frequent you have, the more re-education you have to do for every single meeting.
Yep.
So if we can avoid that, that would be helpful. I think somewhere between every 2 to 4 weeks, 3 maybe, just to split the difference. I wouldn't do less than 4, or more than 4? More?
You wouldn't
Less?
want to go longer than 4?
Yes,
Because-
thank you.
okay. I had to think about it.
Like less than 4, more than 4?
How about from the the town staff side in terms of, I know that there's, between meetings, some work that will end up falling on different departments. I think a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the facility studies has been done by Doran Whittier, but when we get talking about, debt schedules over time and/or potential, new development opportunities, those are things that could, place a burden on Nora, Stephanie, Laura, just what types of feelings do you have on a Cadence?
From my perspective, 3 weeks would work. It's just difficult with a 3-week time frame to then work around all the conflicting meetings, so, which night meetings,
Yeah.
which don't fall conveniently, so it might be tough to schedule.
Right. Select board is typically Monday, planning board is typically Tuesday, you guys are Thursday? Do I hear Wednesday?
Great.
FinCom's
Zoning,
Wednesday.
Conservation Commission are both
Yes.
on
Oh, yeah,
Wednesdays.
this
Right.
Wednesday.
Okay,
Housing
And-
Partnerships usually Thursday.
I was wondering if morning is an option.
This committee used to meet in the morning.
this committee used to meet in the morning via Zoom.
Used to meet
I
in the
know-
morning in person.
In person,
What time?
8 a.m.
8 a.m.
8 a.m.
Yeah, so that's, I know that for some with kids and school drop-offs and things like that, I'm also sensitive to those, right? So, the reality is we're gonna have to split the atom somehow and land on a schedule and land on what that looks like.
Mornings, if you pushed it to like 8:30 or 9, that would be doable, even after this year, because we're finishing up at our current school this year, so wherever we go next is gonna be longer, but I always felt I did not like having to dial in from the car because half of me was paying attention to make sure I didn't get into an accident, and half of me was paying attention to the meeting, so I'd like to be able to give it.
Missed a lot of exits then.
Yes, but now that we're getting into some meaty work, I want to be able to give it my full attention, so I could do mornings, but just that 8 o'clock slot is tough, so if we
Yeah,
could,
I'm commuting as well.
yeah,
Yep.
if we shift that a little bit, that would be fine.
And I think ideally, if we could meet in person, so maybe morning isn't, I just think it's just better for what we're doing.
Well, I mean, staff has conflicts, but we can also do some things and have staff prepare us and not be present in the meetings. So I think we should come up with the schedule that maybe works, but know that some people are coming and going, but the committee is here as much as possible.
We could also, and I don't want to make it more confusing, but we could also alternate,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? Do Wednesday mornings and then Wednesday evening, and then Wednesday morning and then Wednesday evening.
And then, so that's what the parent association at my kid's school does, it's an
Yeah, but
equity
I've got a
thing.
pretty
So that
flexible
sometimes
schedule
it's on Zoom in the
for work,
morning,
so
and
it shouldn't be
sometimes
too
it's in
big of
person
an
at night, and
issue.
sometimes it's in person in the morning. And I would be okay with changing it up like that too, if it makes it easier for everybody to be able to make it work.
You can kind of go for 3 months and kind of reassess.
Yeah, see
All
how
right,
it
I'll
goes.
tell you what, everybody give that some thought, let's try to
Come up
put.
with a proposal.
Well, I'm gonna put that to our future co-chairs to come up with a proposal. And then we can decide that at our next meeting. But before we go to that, when could we meet again? That
The
is
next one should be sooner rather than later.
agreed. I know it's also, holiday time and people's schedules and all the rest, so let's, try to pick a day that everybody can commit to.
Can we get one in before school break?
I think we should.
When does the school
Yeah, when-
system?
24th is the.
Oh, right up
um,
until,
We go right to the 23rd. Yeah.
Yeah, 24th is the first day.
We don't mess around.
oh, 180.
Poor kids.
You need the 180, I get it.
How about the 23rd? Or the 22nd, Monday the 22nd?
22nd would be
I could do
easier.
morning.
Morning on the 22nd?
There's a select board meeting that night, just FYI.
Yep. So morning on the 22nd,
Yes.
8:30, you say?
8:30. On the 22nd,
That's
going
great.
once.
That works.
Sold. All right, good. We have,
We need a room.
No school that day, so I can be here whenever.
in person or Zoom that week?
I think if it's in the morning, I think a Zoom might be easier.
I agree.
mean, just,
Or hybrid.
you know, yeah, or,
I can't make it, but I don't need to be there.
Okay.
I can make it, FS1 steering committee will meet at 10:15, so I just need to be, Nancy and I.
So
need to be done by
8:30,
10:15.
we'll keep
8:30
it
is
to
fine.
90 minutes max. And, okay, so
So, I'm sorry, Zoom or hybrid?
I think we go Zoom.
Okay.
I think we go Zoom. Okay? All right, so just in terms of governance, we sort of touched on the co-chair model. Laura is going to be our fantastic recording secretary and publish both the agendas and the minutes. Thank you. As well as any videos there are that, well, Westwood Media Center, yeah, Media Center will do that. So that's our commitment to transparency, is open conversations recorded and, you know,
Included in that, since we are a formal committee, we cannot communicate via email amongst the whole group.
correct, correct. You can use the town website as, and I'll have a slide that everybody will get a copy of this that has the link to it. But just let's touch on the high-level overview of the facility studies themselves. Did everybody watch? This is as much for the folks at home. So the process was, we contracted with Doran Whittier a couple years ago. They came in and did site visits / inspections, met with the maintenance staff on both the municipal and the school side. They interviewed staff. They did evaluations of the functional workspace in each of the buildings. And then each building has a summary of capital needs. As you talk about addressing some of those capital needs, there are times when that will trigger code compliance, which can drive costs significantly. There are summaries of the functional use and the space needs themselves. When you look at the differences, and I'm sorry, looks like I didn't finish this slide here. Really, the difference is the uses are very similar on the school side. You just have different size users, right, effectively, and maybe some different complexity of needs in terms of lab space and things like that. Obviously, a big component of that were your enrollment studies, and then the MSBA standards as it related to class size. You know, a lot more variation in building usage, the type of usage, the size of staffs, et cetera. So when you look at those summary reports, each one had a scorecard, right? And those were across any number of things from, I'm gonna really challenge my eyes here. So I believe that is, site. Thank you, Tim. I would really appreciate that, because that's just in that zone where I can't see it.
So things like site and civil, exterior building elements, interior accessibility, electrical systems, mechanical systems, plumbing systems, et cetera.
And, you know, red, yellow, green, pretty straightforward in terms of what those connotate.
Yeah, actually, I should also mention functional use of space. Like that's
Yep.
that's a key category there.
And as I mentioned earlier, you guys have been doing quite a bit of sort of roadshow on this to help educate the various PTOs in the community. What type of questions, feedback have you gotten with respect to these reports?
Yeah, so we've gotten a lot, and we're actually just about to put out an FAQ document tomorrow that we'll post on our website and send out via social media and send to our families as well too. You know, I think for this group, like one of the key questions has been, you know, do we have to choose between the schools and FS1? And our answer to that has been no, that ultimately, like, this group is here established so that we can work together as a community, knowing that the needs are great in both areas, knowing that we don't want to be pitting school against municipal uses. And so I don't know if you want to add anything more to that, Maya, but.
Yeah, no, that has definitely come up in all of the forums that we've done. And to Tim's point, our answer has always been it's not an either or, it's an and.
Yep.
And we need to figure out, we have one pot of money, we just need to figure out what the appetite is of the residents in terms of how to spend it. And I think the more education on each project, the better informed they'll be. So that's really that's really the only answer to the question, I think.
That's right. I mean, that's part of the charge with the FS1 committee. I know you guys talked this morning. I haven't watched that meeting yet in terms of, what your mission is to accomplish in terms of short and long-term solutions for the fire station. And I know you guys on the school side have been evaluating a number of different solutions. This is just the scorecard for the current conditions of the buildings. I know that there's probably a half a dozen different scenarios of how you address the various needs.
Yeah, but to be clear, the only decision in front of the school committee right now is whether or not we're going to submit a statement of interest to the MSBA, and if we do, whether we'll submit it for Thurston or whether we'll submit it for Sheehan. We're not, we wouldn't even talk about the various options that were presented. Those would be sort of re-examined in a feasibility study if we got to that point.
Right. Thank you.
How are you going to make that choice?
So we've actually gotten a lot of feedback from the town, from residents. We putting out a survey.
Yeah, that'll go out tomorrow with the FAQ document.
And we have a dedicated email address that we've asked people to email us their thoughts. We've gotten very good responses on that. So we're really just kind of going to take the temperature of what we see in the room or what we're hearing, and then also, have a deliberation on what we think makes the most sense.
Does the MSBA offer anything in terms of which one they would say, this looks like a better one for you to submit in a roundabout kind of way?
No.
Not really.
Not really, yeah. I certainly, there is certainly a lot of expertise in this community working with the MSBA through the Pine Hill project most recently. I had experience in my former district working with the MSBA as well too. So, we have been certainly working to get face time with the MSBA as much as possible because they have certain criteria that they use to evaluate schools through their competitive grant process. And they include things like, do you actually have a master plan? And so the fact that we have one puts us in better stead. Or do you have issues with some of your major systems like plumbing or electrical? Or I think we can say check for both schools on that front. Do you have enrollment and space capacity issues? All those things, so those all help inform the committee's decision as well.
But one thing they do look at, that they look at from the start of the program all the way through, is community support, right? They don't want to be funding projects that then go to a vote and are shot down.
It's not, right.
So I think the fact that we're also conducting all of this outreach to make the deliberation and factoring that into the decision is going to help as well with whatever we come up with.
It's interesting because it's not necessarily two separate populations that opine. There's overlap because families have children coming in at the next level, but how to do it where it's not a popularity contest.
Right.
So it's not numbers that will guide you, but I'm sure in your process and you're explaining all the issues that are present in both. I'm just, in my mind, trying to process the importance of that community input, but then the separate nature of your decision-making. That just informs you, it doesn't direct you.
Correct.
Am I right in that?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
There's also some learning to
Good
be
luck.
had. I think there's learning to
not
be
you.
had you guys have natural constituent groups in your PTOs, right? So you can set up a road show to do those types of things. But I think when we get to a place of maybe some of the preliminary prioritization out of this group, a very similar type of roadshow or series of meetings might be beneficial to get people mentally on board with, yeah, we have a lot of things that we need to be able to address. And, you know, I understand the level of thought that's being put into that. So that may be something for us to revisit down the line when we get to some of the community engagement piece. On the municipal side, this one is sort of ranked worst to least worst in terms of the top 5. There were a number of other things, and just so that people understand, obviously everybody's familiar with FS1. The White House at the DPW is probably something most people have no idea what that is. It is the building that is up behind Carby Street's building where the planning division and Nora's team are down there. And that building is, how old, Nora?
I couldn't even tell you. Probably
Which
from
one, the white-
1930s.
The White House, the White
1930s,
House.
1930s.
It
maybe?
is,
Change
it
the
is, yeah, it's
Town Road to Hale,
yeah.
right? As you go.
And it is,
It's an antique.
it's an antique, it's undersized horribly, and it's in awful condition. You'll remember a couple years ago, we voted to take and purchase the American Legion building. That is also in some pretty significant disrepair and in need of, but that could be when we start talking about potential creative solutions. That could be a repurposed space or a reconstructed space that could address a bunch of things. And then obviously Town Hall is one that has accessibility issues. You know, it's 115 years old, I believe. So that one is at some point going to need significant renovation, which then triggers a bunch of code compliance. So this, when we talk about some of these things, there's a lot of dominoes that fall depending on what we try to address through repair. And then this is just the full set of buildings or properties that Dora and Whittier looked at across the municipal side. So just, it's not in the same order that we were in before, but this is the complete picture of the facilities on the town side.
Hey, Rob, has Dora and Whittier or anybody been able to tell us other communities that have done something like this master planning successfully? This is a big meal to absorb.
Yes, and it's why Molly will be able to tell you that
Are we a leader?
We're gonna be a leader, Nancy. Stephanie and I participated in a group of the managers and assistants in Norfolk County. We had a meeting probably right when this came out in June or July.
Yep.
And I brought up to the group, you know, who's done a facilities plan, master plan recently that's really worked out, who was the charge? Crickets. So we're gonna be at the forefront of this.
oftentimes
It
these
sits on a
things,
shelf.
yeah, it sits on a shelf. So, you know, we're taking the initiative to try and address as creatively and collaboratively as we can, as many of the needs. So, you know, for everybody, when I send, or Laura, when you send this out, these are live links. So the school committee meeting on April 7th, that link is queued up to go right to when Michelle Rogers began presenting to you all. The same thing for the July 9th select board meeting. Both of those are videos found on Westwood Media Center's YouTube page. And then the full reports, the executive summaries, which are not executive summaries, they are lengthy themselves. I believe the school's executive summary is 43 pages, the municipal executive summary is 50 pages, and there are thousands of pages of supporting material in the full report. So if anybody is looking for where, how can I find information, trying to make that as clear and easy to access as possible. So how are we going to eat this elephant over the next 12 months? So, and this we can use to revisit the frequency and cadence when we get together on the 22nd. You know, I see today as sort of our launch. And next, I see we start to get into the meat of those facility studies and have, an opportunity to engage and really ask questions related to those things, so that we can begin that prioritization and put together a framework for that. Then, depending on when Stephanie's back from maternity leave, we'll find, an opportunity to do some financial capacity review. That's where we'll take a look at what our debt schedule looks like, what that looks like related to our financial policies as to what our debt ceilings are. I can tell you that we have far more room under our cap from a debt policy standpoint than I believe the community has appetite to absorb. So, it is not, oh, we can afford everything because there's room under the ceiling. And then ultimately, I'd love to get back to about this point next year and have that master plan that we can put forward to the community and say, this is what the vision is, based on what we know today, what new growth is forecast, what our debt schedule looks like, and, so that's what I see as a potential process roadmap. Is there anybody that sees anything that I've overlooked? Is there anything that, you think is, I've put too much into the detailed review of the facilities work?
But one thing I think we should,
Raise your hand.
I'm just thinking, maybe when we meet again in December, January, I can't help but be thinking about, is there anything we see right away that warrants a town meeting action now? And let me give you an example, because we really haven't touched on it, but we have the ability, not that we have the funds, but let's talk hypothetically, to save money in a capital stabilization fund. That's sort of a savings account, targeted for capital projects. I haven't said anything wrong yet, have I?
Not yet.
Not yet. The caveat, if you had money. I'm just saying we should always be thinking about ways to squirrel away money to use for a larger project, or I came in here today thinking we have the meals and hotel tax. I don't know if we can, by policy or action, take some money out of that and bank it, put it aside, designate it. So I think my bigger point is we should always be looking along the way. Is there anything we can peel off out of awareness this group comes to make recommendations that might not be developing the master plan, but still may be action-oriented for the town? I know we did it with the charter when we were going through the review recently, and we said, wow, we really have a problem with our tax collector and treasurer position. Let's not wait till our final recommendation. Let's take it through the system now. And we did, and the town approved it. So
So an example of that could be if the schools are going to ask us to put on the warrant to transfer Deerfield back, right?
Exactly.
There might be some ways to say, okay, well, you took the folks that are at Carby Street right now and you were able to renovate that building to accommodate all of those different user groups and the space needs, et cetera. Well, that would certainly free up Carby Street for DPW, which could, on relatively short money, solve a bunch of those problems and put a relatively, underutilized resource right now back in play. So, but that's, I think, an example of what you're talking
opportunities
about.
all along the way.
Yeah. Anything that I'm missing here?
So I think this is something where you can look through sort of either end of the lens of this telescope.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, given these studies and all the data we have about the buildings and their needs, those colored slides and everything, whether it might not make sense to start with the creative options and consolidation, not knowing exactly what buildings in which order from which side might use that flexibility, but sort of taking as a given that we can't do everything that either side, let alone both sides, wants to do when they want to do it. There's a given, there's a big backlog. We know that, you know, these X buildings on the school side and these Y buildings on the town side have needs that amount to Z millions of dollars. Should we start with what's our capacity to pay now? What are the things that we can look at to have an impact on that? What are the things that we might forego in order to do that? And then, after we've done that, say, okay, we found the ability to enable X amount of additional spending. How do we spend it? I mean, you can look, there's no right way or wrong way to do this. It just seems as though we've got so much information. You know, we've got whatever it is, 500 pages of reports.
Thousands, literally
On thousands of pages of reports on, and many colors and so on. I'm not sure this group is going to add that much. I mean, we're going to take that and give it a broader context and sort of push and pull and try to improve things. But
I hear you, and I think one of the things, and this will be what comes out of some of these conversations, is the number of dependencies and dominoes that fall when you start doing that, right? So, okay, the if-then scenario, right? If a building were not going to be used either at all or to its full capacity, if something else is done, well then, could that create an opportunity for, I don't know, let's make believe Deerfield was just coming offline, and we said, you know what, that, because of the fields that are adjacent to it, could be a fabulous expanded senior center and rec department, right? And, oh, by the way, you could probably locate human services in there because there'd be a really cool intergenerational thing going on too. So, you know, that's the type of conversation that I think we have to have, but those are really dependent on what's going to happen in other places and when are those things going to happen, because you can't say, okay, we're going to use that Deerfield, you know, in this case it's empty, but, you know, we're not going to use that for, we'll use it for the senior center, and therefore we could take the senior center and give that to, you know, the schools as maybe administration hub on a educational campus of some sort. You know, there are things like that that could happen, but you've got to figure out what do you do in the interim, right? Because if we're spending on X because that's an urgent need, and that creates an opportunity, well, how do we afford that opportunity in a time frame that makes sense? That's, I'm with you on, you know,
yeah,
how.
I mean, I don't think either one is sort of, you know, the 100%, you know, you can't do it any other way. You could certainly look at it through either lens.
And the other thing that I, as I look at this now and think back on the earlier part of the conversation that's not on here, I think having a meeting or two dedicated to how do we grow revenue would be appropriate to fit into this whole thing, because as we know, sales cures a lot of ills. So.
Well, and something to that point as well is, you know, the scorecard is, of course, really objective kind of black and white data that we're getting, right? But I think it's important to have a level of subjectivity to that as well, going back to the fact that the projects that we want to do are for the betterment of the residents that live here. So keeping that in mind to say, okay, if something scored worse than the other, but you have a bigger impact by trying to improve something that just because it scored a little bit better doesn't mean that you should prioritize it less. if it's going to have a bigger impact for the community. So I think keeping that, kind of going back to that as a cornerstone could be helpful.
I did have a thought about, and maybe it was a financial capacity review, which might kind of link into some of the financial conversations, but to me, we have a lot of studies, and when I read them through, I kept kind of going, okay, well, what are we trying to solve to? What's the art of the possible? What is the potential financial capacity? Without having even kind of a range around that, it's hard to know too much what to do within the studies details. So that's just.
And one of the challenges with all of this, and you guys can speak to this on the school side as well, is the work that Dorn Whittier did gave us a sense of what are the costs, rough order of magnitude, associated with keeping these buildings working, and maybe on the school side, some creative options for what that could look like. But until you get into planning those things, you don't know what that plan looks like, what that debt environment might look like, and then therefore what the true cost of that is. So we're going to be coming at this as sort of a 30,000 foot rough order magnitude approach, right? Because until we actually commit to a design, we can't have cost certainty on any of the buildings.
Yeah, I think I was more around kind of what's the bandwidth or the art of the possible around the revenue piece or the means piece or the tax impacts piece.
The revenue side is one where I think we can talk a lot about the art of the possible. The bandwidth side in terms of debt capacity, we could probably talk to.
So when we talk about debt capacity, I can absolutely, I have done it before, do a short presentation in the group. Within Prop 2.5, the debt capacity we just went out and borrowed, it's nothing for the next 2 or 3 years, and probably nothing significant for the next 10 years. So everything we talk about is a debt exclusion. So when we say capacity, we have a legal debt margin right now of over $300 million. So we could borrow any of that. It's the appetite for taxpayers. So when we say capacity, the only capacity we're talking about is taxpayer appetite for what they want to pay
That's
for
right.
debt exclusion.
Unless there's a university station that happens really
Correct.
quickly and you get.
So
you grow
10 years
sick.
ago, the police station and FS2 were done within Prop 2.5. Combined, those projects were 20 million. I think I'm saying
A little
that's
under that.
a little under 20 million for both projects, with brand new millions of dollars from university stations. That's half of what FS1 is, and with dedicated revenue sources at the time.
So wouldn't we have to make some assumptions around like level of debt exclusions that are likely to be palatable, like even a
Say that
range?
again?
We don't know what's palatable.
Right. I mean, well, so some of that
So
gets to
anything
whatever-
within Prop 2.5 that we would want to add, say, to that budget and fund projects without adding to the tax bill, would need to be cut from somewhere else in the operating budget or a new revenue source.
Yeah, we're really talking about.
That pretty much sums it up.
Yeah.
I'll absolutely
don't
come
need
to
to
the
do
full
presentation.
presentation though.
That's the candid conversation that needs to be had so that people understand. And back to Eric's point, that's where we also have to take into account what the greatest benefit is to the community, right? So, there's a lot of dominoes that are gonna have to be tumbled as we talk about these things. And, we're at probably 3.5%, 4% is what our total debt load is right now, in terms of debt service.
Mhm.
I think we're allowed 8%, for our
For within,
financial
it's
pol-
about 8% for our financial policies. Total overall is about 12%. So
Right.
that's 8 million and 12 million.
And
And
if
right
you
now
think
we're at
about-
3.
If you think about where people are, right? People are tax exhausted. You've got inflationary pressures, you've got all kinds of job concerns. The idea that we could go to 12, which is 3.5x from where we are today, that's not gonna be realistic either. So that's where we've gotta really be creative. So, all right, I wanna sort of bring us home here and say, okay, I'll taking the two of you to the select board on Monday night. Thank you for being willing to do so. Laura, you'll issue minutes from this. You know, I put as of the first of the year, I don't know what the sort of catch-up will be on that. And then we have set our next meeting for the 22nd, 8:30 a.m. And at some point, you guys can help us by beginning to circulate a draft of a rubric that we might use to do some of the prioritization, right? Because we have the scoring that exists, and then there are other considerations in terms of impact to the greatest number of residents, you know, some if-then scenarios around, well, if a building becomes available, that would be a great solution for X, Y, and Z, right? So, how do people feel about the work that is before us?
Bring it on.
Not inconsequential, but I like the composition of the room to get it done.
I think it's necessary, and I like what I'm hearing, because I think everybody seems to be really sensitive to the fact that this is a challenge. There's a lot of things to balance, and the thing that made me really happy that I heard mentioned several times was sensitivity to what we've been hearing from the community. I think there's been a lot of messages coming back up to all of us about how residents are feeling about projects in general, and as you say, they're tax exhausted. People are very concerned about their finances, so I really appreciate that there was a lot of focus on that aspect in this conversation. I think that's really important, because I think, as Maya said, we can all talk and propose, and it's going to come down to what the residents decide they want to vote for. So I think keeping that perspective as we move forward really positions us for success. So thank you for keeping the focus on that aspect too.
I think that's important. I also think creativity is key. Like, there is no bad idea. Like, if you're driving and you see a site, you know, that we're talking about, and you think, what if we fill in the blank, right? Like, just, I mean, take or bring that up at a meeting, or.
There's definitely some underutilized properties in town.
Yes.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Ellen, because I think we all have heard, you know, some concerns around utilization, and a lot of it is not accurate. So I think focusing on that and maybe reporting out to the community at some point about utilization would be helpful.
Some of it's just my opinion driving by. So I'm talking commercial buildings as far as
Oh, I'm
opportunities.
talking.
No, for new growth. There's definitely some commercial properties that, in my opinion, are underutilized. Just kind of there's potential there, in my opinion. So I think that's a conversation I'd like to have at a future meeting, is kind of looking at the inventory, what exists, and just because there's a property on it, it doesn't mean it's developed to its highest and best. And maybe we can find creative ways to work with the planning department and the plan to incentivize some things there, because that would be, I'm definitely interested in some revenue streams. I think everybody would be happy if we could generate some revenue without impacting the community in ways that people would not find palatable. So that seems like a good place to start.
All right. With that, yes.
Would January 12th work as a next meeting while I have everybody in the
I love you.
I like what we're doing. I like what we're
And
doing.
there's no select board as of right now, there's no FinCom, and there's no planning board that night.
I don't think so.
I got nothing on my calendar. That's a
That
good date.
I like that.
Sorry, what date?
12
No,
or
I'm gonna
12?
send 2 meeting invitations tomorrow.
And is that, would we do that in person in the evening?
You're
I'm in like
into,
September.
yeah, you're into 2027.
I'm not sure. The 22nd?
Not considering.
No,
January
January 12th.
Oh, January 12th.
January 12th.
I don't think that would fly.
I don't think that would fly.
You're talking morning or night?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I can do January 12th.
Facilities might work. Those are pretty low impact, and then just go behind.
Starting
the
at
wall.
6?
And I don't know what kind of revenue that generates of interest. and that we're
For now,
talking
it
about.
does.
For now, it works for me.
Oh, interesting.
There's
All right, good. We have 2 meetings on the books then.
It's only a 495.
Thank you, Laura.
There was one that was going there on this
Would
side.
you like a motion to adjourn?
I would.
I move we adjourn.
Doesn't make
Second.
sense.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye. Oh,
I think we have to do a roll call because Pat's on the phone.
Pat's on the phone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Did he drop or is he
Well,
still on?
He's
Who's
ex
ex
officio.
officio?
Oh, then he's not voting.
Forget it. Right, so
I didn't realize.
we are adjourned.